Stop for a second before you reach for your wallet. Stop before you tap buy now. Before you tell yourself you are being smart, independent, and free. Because the most painful truth about modern choice is this: you are not choosing freely. You are choosing inside a cage designed to feel like comfort. You think the modern market gives you options. It doesn't. It gives you a menu of distractions that keeps you calm while power stays concentrated. It turns freedom into a product, and it trains your brain to confuse more alternatives with more control. Today I am going to pull apart that illusion with the kind of clarity most people cannot tolerate, because it forces you to notice how much of your life is shaped by systems you never voted for. Welcome to the hidden self. This is where we name the mechanisms you were never taught to see. Not because they are conspiracy, but because they are psychological reality. You will hear the uncomfortable parts. How choice overload paralyzes you, how competition is staged, how identity is manufactured through consumption, how convenience becomes a chemical-like sedative, and how the real power structure behind the scenes makes your personal freedom mostly performative. Let's start with the simplest trap, the one that sounds like common sense. In a free society, you are taught that more options equals more happiness. The marketing version of this belief is everywhere. More choices in stores, more brands on a screen, more personalization in your feed, more variants, more colors, more limited editions, more ways to feel like you are in control. But your brain does not experience more freedom. It experiences overload. Think about the last time you stood in a grocery aisle staring at cereal. Not one or two options. Tens of options. Similar ingredients. Similar promises. Different packaging colors and cartoons. Your mind starts doing what it always does when reality is uncertain. It searches for cues that feel safe. It picks the brand that looks familiar. The brand you have seen in ads. The brand that signals belonging to the identity you are trying to maintain. The choice isn't driven by values, it is driven by familiarity and frictionlessness. Now extend that micro story. You do it again with a phone. You spend hours comparing processors, cameras, battery specs, resale value, software updates. You tell yourself you are being rational. But underneath, you are trying to solve a hidden anxiety, the fear of being behind, the fear of being judged, the fear that your life is falling out of sync with the social timeline. Then you buy the phone and you feel a short relief, and immediately the next craving forms. Because the system didn't just sell you a device, it trained a loop. Uncertainty leads to searching, searching leads to decision, decision leads to temporary relief, relief leads to new anxiety. It is not that you lack willpower. It is that the environment is engineered to harvest your nervous system. This is the paradox of choice. It does not liberate you, it immobilizes you. When you have too many tiny decisions, you stop making big decisions. You become exhausted. You default to what is preloaded in your brain by advertising budgets that could buy countries. Here is the brutal point. Sometimes choice is not freedom. Sometimes choice is management. Not management of your life goals. Management of your attention, your energy, your spending, your emotional temperature. The market overwhelms you with irrelevant questions, so you do not ask the relevant ones. Like why you need a new phone every year. Like why your finances are built on debt that quietly becomes normal. Like why the healthiest default option is always the hardest one to access. Like why you never truly investigate who owns what you consume. The system takes your desire for control and turns it into a treadmill. You think you are moving forward, but you are moving in place, expending your nervous energy so the powerful remain unchallenged. Now let's go deeper, because the next layer is where the illusion becomes a performance. You have been conditioned to believe that brands compete fiercely for your loyalty. Lower prices, better quality, innovative features. The advertising tells a clean story. Two rivals fight. You benefit. Capitalism improves life. It is a comforting narrative, the kind that lets people sleep at night because it makes their spending feel like participation in progress. But look at what happens when you trace the money backward. Walk into a large supermarket in the US or Europe. Thousands of products, hundreds of brands. You see variety and you assume separation. You assume independent companies fighting for share. You assume real competition. Then you follow ownership. You find that many brands are siblings under the same parent. Not metaphorically, legally, financially, operationally. The same corporate entity holds multiple brands that appear to be opponents. They fight on the shelf because it makes you feel like you are choosing between rivals. But behind the shelf, the strategies often align. So when brand A runs a promotion to outcompete brand B, it is not always a dramatic battle for your welfare. It can be a controlled internal reallocation. One brand grabs attention, another brand protects premium positioning, another brand targets budget buyers, and the parent corporation profits from both sides of the emotional equation. Let me give you an example in human terms. Imagine you prefer cola that tastes like childhood. You buy it because it feels right. Another week you want something more modern, less sugary, more clean. You buy another cola. You tell yourself you are switching because your preferences evolved. But your preferences are being interpreted and monetized. Even your switching becomes predictable data. Your preference is not an expression of freedom. It is a segmentation outcome. The corporation models your psychology and offers you an identity package that matches it. That is why the shelf looks like diversity while ownership looks like consolidation. And the reason they stage competition is not kindness. It is power management. If a corporation owns multiple brands across price tiers, it can occupy more shelf space and crowd out smaller players. You think you face many choices. In reality, many choices belong to the same financial family. It becomes a monopoly disguised as a marketplace. This is the part where most viewers say, okay, but competition still matters. Prices still vary. Quality still differs. Yes, sometimes. But the real question is not whether there are differences. The real question is whether the system allows differences to become real change. If two brands are effectively controlled by the same ownership structure, then you are watching theater. The applause is real. The fight is partial. The result benefits the same masters. And now we escalate again, because the illusion does not stop at consumer goods. There is another level of ownership that most people never look at, because it destroys the fairy tale that markets are independent. You have probably heard of large asset managers, the ones that quietly hold stakes across many industries. These managers can influence corporate governance across banks, energy, media, technology, and healthcare. When you see the repeated names across major companies, you stop thinking about competition as a force that disciplines greed. You start recognizing competition as a tool that disciplines you. Think of it like this. If the same financial entity holds significant power over two companies that appear to be rival candidates in your mind, do you believe they will allow a price war that destroys their shared profits? Do you believe they will allow service cuts that are too extreme for one company while the other expands? Of course they will optimize together. They do not need to meet in a dark room. They only need aligned incentives and overlapping ownership. So what is competition really? It becomes a coordinated symphony, not the symphony of your empowerment, the symphony of extracting value from your money and your attention. And this is where people get angry, because anger is one of the last defenses against helplessness. But before anger, I need you to face the mechanism. Your choices are not only being limited, they are being nudged. Algorithms are the modern replacement for the invisible hand. In classical theory, prices emerge from supply and demand. In practice, prices can be managed, guided, and synchronized through data models and software systems. When multiple sellers use similar pricing tools, they can converge towards similar pricing behavior, not because they are honest competitors, but because they are responding to the same signals, the same optimization targets, and the same profit constraints. You can describe it as digital collusion without a single meeting. Now think about what that means for you. If pricing is algorithmically shaped, your bargaining power collapses. If your access to products is algorithmically curated, your exploration collapses. If your choices funnel through a platform that also sells its own private label equivalents, your freedom becomes a guided path. The platform becomes a gatekeeper and a player. It controls the visibility of choices. It controls the order of options. It controls which products seem trustworthy. It controls the friction you experience. It controls the recommendations that feel like personalized care. And you confuse those recommendations with intuition. You think I discovered this product. But discovery is often just rank optimization. You think, I found the best deal. But the deal is engineered inside a system that knows your thresholds and your patterns. Your mind is not just choosing, your mind is being trained, which leads directly to the next hidden mechanism: identity. The market doesn't only sell products, it sells stories about who you are allowed to be. The most successful marketing does not target needs, it targets identity. It tells you that if you buy the right thing, you become the kind of person your social world respects. You are not buying a shoe, you are buying a signal. You are not buying a coffee, you are buying a posture. You are not buying skincare, you are buying the fantasy of being controlled by self-discipline instead of being controlled by fear. So why do you choose Starbucks instead of the local cafe where the owner remembers your name? Maybe you genuinely like it, but most of the time you like the feeling it gives you socially. You like the ritual. You like the brand language that tells others, I belong. You like the self-esteem shortcut. Why do you choose an iPhone instead of Android? Sometimes it's convenience, sometimes it's ecosystem. But a lot of the time it's also symbolic. It says I'm modern, I'm competent, I'm not behind. It reduces uncertainty about status, because status has become a performance you manage with purchases. Why do you choose a minimalist lifestyle over an organic lifestyle, or an organic brand over a generic brand? Because the market packages lifestyles as categories with aesthetics and moral narratives. It sells you rebellion and it sells you virtue as purchasable identity. And here is the ugly truth that people avoid. And so instead consumption becomes a substitute for authorship. You don't design your life, you buy your personality. You don't choose a way of living. You choose a curated set of items that someone else designed for a segment of people like you. So your free choice is your participation in the construction of a branded self. It feels empowering because it is active. You are doing something. You are shopping, researching, comparing, deciding. But inside that activity, you are being defined by someone else's market research. That is why the cage feels like a mirror. You look at your purchases and you say, this is me. But often it is not you. It is a reflection of what the market predicted you might buy to feel safe. Now, once identity is attached to purchases, the system gets stronger. Because your brain resists threats to identity like it resists threats to survival. If you ever try to break the loop, you feel guilt, fear, and confusion. Not because you truly need the item, but because changing choices threatens the story you have been telling yourself. So why do people keep going? This is where convenience becomes the final sedation. Modern life is built to eliminate friction. One tap and food appears. One payment and subscriptions renew. One search and answers arrive. One scroll and entertainment floods your attention. One delivery and the item arrives with no effort. The market calls this efficiency. But psychologically, it is a drug. It makes your brain less capable of discomfort, less capable of patience, less capable of reflection. Because when life is frictionless, you do not practice the muscles required for real change. Planning, delayed gratification, local community building, and self-directed decision-making. You are not only buying products, you are buying relief from the work of thinking. And the work of thinking is exactly what the system wants you to avoid. When you let algorithms guide what you see, you become easier to predict. When you let convenience guide what you buy, you become harder to disrupt. When you let platforms own the journey, you become dependent on the journey. So people accept surveillance because it gives speed. People accept platform dominance because it gives delivery. People accept financial exploitation because it allows spending before earning. They accept it all because they are tired, anxious, and busy. And tired, anxious, busy people do not revolt, they optimize. That is the addiction. Convenience teaches your nervous system to crave ease. Then it sells you ease with invisible strings. Imagine a bird in a cage where the bars are warmed by the sun, where food is always plentiful, where the bird never has to hunt. The bird does not fly out, not because it cannot, because it would rather not risk discomfort. That is you, in a metaphor that fits too well. You live in a happy cage where choice is available but movement is controlled. You can pick colors for your furniture, pick brands for your supplements, pick aesthetics for your social media profile, pick subscriptions for entertainment. But you do not pick the rules of the game. You do not pick who profits from your spending at scale. You do not pick how prices behave behind the scenes. You do not pick the attention economy design that keeps you scrolling instead of working on your real goals. You do not pick the credit system that trains you to borrow your future. So the question becomes less philosophical and more personal. How much of your life is being run by someone else's optimization? When you zoom out far enough, you start seeing a concentration of power that is historically unusual. Agriculture is controlled by a handful of corporate giants. Technology infrastructure is controlled by a small group of massive firms. Finance and asset management concentrate influence across countless industries. This is not normal market chaos. This is centralized planning without a democratic label. It is private administration of industries through boards, algorithms, and investment portfolios. Instead of a government planning what you consume, you have committees of decision makers and software systems planning for profit. The plan is not written like a manifesto. It is written in